She took over export quotas of a sequestered private garment firm, Glorious Sun Fashion Garments Manufacturing. I won't state anymore all the things, all the money, and all the properties she got together with her siblings, because I already discussed that in connection with Bongbong earlier. But I will mention that she inherited some of Imelda's ill-gotten jewelry because she reports them now in her SALNS. She reports that now her jewelry, in effect, is the bulk of her properties. They have increased in value more than 400% between 2010 and 2000. 1 year lang, nag-increase ng value yung ng 400, more than 400% yung jewelry niya. Anong ibig sabihin nun? She got more jewelry. Saan niya kinuha yung jewelry? If you're gonna base her wealth only on her salaries as a congresswoman and then as a senator, hindi niya ma-afford yun. So saan niya nakuha? Paano niya nakuha yung jewelry na yon na worth tens of millions of dollars? No? And of course, she's actively securing the Marcos political dynasty by her own running for these different positions. Okay, last but not least, Irene Marcos. Okay, sasabihin niyo sa akin, attorney naman, pati ba naman si Irene ipapatulan ninyo? Siya yung pinaka-cute, pinaka-soft, silent lang naman yan, wala namang ginagawa yan. Bakit niyo pinapatulan si Irene? Narinig na ba ninyo yung kasabihan, silent waters run deep? Yun ang nasagot ko sa inyo. Ito ang mga ginagawa ni Irene. She is also actively promoting and pursuing Marcos' program of denialism and revisionism. She is actively executing Marcos' social media program of denialism and revisionism through TikTok and vloggers. You know, nabigla ako. Nung in-investigate ko to, some of the more active TikTokers are the TikTokers of Irene because they're very active in promoting, they're showing such cute pictures of her and her family and her husband, Greggy Araneta. Si Greggy actually hindi na siya kasama sa mga later pictures. Kaya nga ang speculation, saan na si Greggy Araneta? Yun ang tanong sa social media. Where is Greggy Araneta? She also infiltrated the cultural and art scene, specifically Dulaang UP, aimed at spreading and promoting Marcos' denialism and revisionism. She acquired lucrative business and loans with her husband through her father's influence and power. What is this? It's the Pantranco North Express. And they acquired Pantranco North Express under the dummy corporation North Express Transport Inc., NETI, through the inner maneuverings that Marcos did within PNB. They have behest loans from Marcos-controlled Security Bank. 2 loans, $1.3 million undated promissory note, and a $1.3 million loan for the Araneta-run Irene Marcos Export Company, or IMEXCO. She also accepted and enjoyed from her parents their ill-gotten wealth. We already discussed that, but she received the Hans Menzie estate and a Forbes Park mansion. Hindi ko na banggit yung nakuha ni Amy. Ang nakuha ni Amy sa mga properties was Fairmont House compound in Baguio and the Wakwak House and lot, which was finally sequestered by the PCGG and sold for 127 million pesos in 2011. Balik tayo kay Irene. Ano pa ang ginagawa ni Irene, no? She created an offshore account with her husband, Orient Wind Development Limited, registered in the British Virgin Islands. I'm not saying that this corporation was formed for criminal purposes. I'm only saying that it looks awfully similar to the modus operandi of her parents. Okay? I mean, is that just a coincidence? Will not a normal thinking, rational, logical mind at least question that? All right. Okay. The last part is I'm just going to quickly talk about the Hague ruling in favor of the Philippines versus China. Why? Because Bongbong Marcos makes no secret of the fact that he completely intends to forgo with the Hague ruling and work out deals with China. And why is this also near and dear to my heart? Alam nyo, pwede niyong sabihin, siguro si attorney, nag-iimbento ka lang ng kwento. Kasi paanong nangyari na napaka-unbelievable naman yan, na mga linilecture mong yan, you were involved somehow with each of them. You helped the PCGG, and now you're telling us that you were a research associate that helped the UNCLOS Philippine delegation to help define what an archipelagic state is. Napakaswerte mo naman, attorney. Sa totoo lang ito, this is one of the things that I think about in my life. No, na, alam nyo, one of my greatest sadnesses in my life is I have 3 degrees in the law, okay? A pre-law degree, a law degree, and a master of law degree. And hindi naman sa pagmamalaki, pero I have always been one of the cream of the crop of any graduating class I've had. And for some reason, fate has destined me for a different life. Nung nag-immigrate ako sa States dahil nag-asawa ko ng Amerikano, dahil na in love ako, you cannot quarrel with love. You cannot dictate who we fall in love with, no? My greatest sadness is hindi ko na i-practice, na ipagpatuloy ang legal career ko. And with all of my knowledge, training, and expertise, hindi ko, ang sadness ko, hindi ko na ipagpatuloy na tulungan ang kapwa, ang sambayanang Pilipino, ang aking bayan. Hindi ko nagamit ng gusto yung training ko, yung knowledge ko, yung skills ko para matulungan ko kayo sa Pilipinas sa pamamagitan ng pagkaabogado ko. Excuse me, forgive me. Heart to heart ito, no? Pero, nung in-invite ako ng CLSU to deliver these lectures in Masa, no, I'm so thankful to them. Kasi, to me, it is a great honor dahil I'm now able to use my legal knowledge and skills to help you understand all of these complicated issues, no? To possibly help you, I hope, help our Filipino people to make wise decisions in the upcoming elections. So this is now fate telling me, no, your legal training and education was not in vain, because now you're able to use your intellect and knowledge to explain this to your fellow Filipinos, which I'm doing now to you. At hindi ba miraculous na itong mga bagay or now these issues that are now being raised because of Bongbong Marcos possibly becoming the next president, naging involved ako from the very beginning when those issues were being created. So let's go now, no? Because I was the research associate who helped define what archipelagic state is. The UNCLOS, just some basic things to know about international law, okay? it's composed of two things, public international law and private international law. Hindi ko i-discuss yung private, yung lang public ang relevant sa discussion natin with regards to the Hague ruling. And what constitutes public international law? It is composed of the customary acts or practices of states. It is also composed of international treaties and conventions and the agreements of states, no? And then it is also composed of the national juridical decisions and also the laws of the states who got together to, as an international community, and agree to abide by this public international law, no? And in respect of the Philippines, territorial sovereignty of the Philippines composed of two things, territorial sovereignty over your land and your territorial sovereignty over your waters. The territory is defined by law in the Philippine Constitution. Excuse me. Basahin na lang ninyo yung Philippine Constitution. I just want to discuss international law as regards to Philippine territorial waters sovereignty. And this is governed, you will find this primarily from the UNCLOS provisions, which I helped out with. No? And there, kasi noon, bago yung UNCLOS, the issue was, kung landlocked country ka, or you are basically a continent like Australia practically, no? There is no argument on what's your land territory. Kasi basically, yung land mo is homogeneous and integral as one big piece of land, no? Pero ang problema ay, what about countries like the Philippines? Na yung land ng Philippines ay sabog, no? It's distributed among more than 7,000 islands. So the question then was, how do we define the territory of countries like the Philippines that are archipelagos and are composed of thousands of islands? So we defined archipelago as follows. It's a group of islands, including parts of islands, interconnecting waters and other natural features, which are so closely interrelated that such islands, waters, and other natural features form an intrinsic geographical, economic, and political entity, or which historically have been regarded as such. Okay. Siguro, it just went over your heads, no? Dahil very legal lingo. So, hindi pa ako lawyer. I participated in creating that definition because we wanted to make sure na mapoprotektahan namin ang teritoryo ng Pilipinas. We had to make it very comprehensive and very detailed. Tapos, we defined archipelagic state as a state constituted wholly by one or more archipelagos and may include other islands. As simple as that. Tapos ito, ang pinag-awayan namin sa UNCLOS. Pero the Philippine delegation with our assistance was successful in arguing to provide these water territories, which resulted in 4 territorial water rights for the Philippines. Number 1 is the territorial sea, which means, nakikita nyo yung map na to, where my cursor is? Territorial sea is up to 12 nautical miles measured from baselines. So the way we decided kung anong territory ng Pilipinas, we drew baselines connecting the outermost points of the islands. Ano? Ayan. You see my cursor? Tapos sabi namin, anything within those baselines are the internal sovereign waters of the Philippines, no? So yung mga waters between the islands, only Philippines have exclusive territorial sovereignty in there, no? Tapos sabi namin, outside of those baselines, up to 12 nautical miles is the territorial sea. Exclusive dominion din yan ng Pilipinas. Yan yung, so yung dark blue, ang internal waters, yung medium blue, yun yan ang territorial waters. Tapos, we also help in proposing for a contiguous zone of up to 24 miles from the baselines, no? Contiguous zone, yan. Kasi instrumental yon for determining the exclusive economic zone or EEZ, which is the light blue. Itong area na light blue, yan, exclusive economic zone yan up to 200 nautical miles from the baseline. In that EEZ, we have exclusive rights to exploit the natural resources, to protect the marine environment, no? And to do everything, to research the marine environment. Tayo lang ang may rights sa ganyan, no? Tapos, hindi lang yon. We have rights to the continental shelf. Kasi, makikita nyo dito, ang lupa, hindi naman straight lang yan, di ba? Merong range, merong slope. Okay? So, ang island, hindi lang island siya tapos drop na siya tapos sea na yon. Hindi ganon, no? So, ang ginawa namin ay, all right, recognizing the natural contours of the land, this, no, 12 nautical miles from the baselines is your territorial sea. Ayan, no? And then 200 nautical miles from the territorial sea is your EEZ. No? So pwede kang mag-drill for oil, pwede kang mag-fish, research, etc. No? Pero hindi lang yun. No? Sabi namin, up to 350 nautical miles beyond the 200 nautical mile, beyond the 12 nautical mile territorial sea, up to at least 1 foot from where the rise is of the slope of the land, you also are entitled, Philippines is also entitled to what they call continental shelf rights, which are practically the same as the EEZ rights. So ang nangyari dito, it effectively extended the territorial waters of the Philippines in respect of exploration and exploitation of natural resources. And this is very important when you consider, wala yata akong na slide about that, but they call it the Benham rice, which they are now wanting to rename as the Philippine rice, kasi that is an area in the eastern part of the Philippine Ocean, Philippine Sea dito, na yung continental shelf extends and extends and extends. So ang nangyari, yung EEZ natin na extended. That is to our benefit, no? Kaya lang, pasok ang China, no? Ito namang China, ganito nagkakaso, no? Ang China. Sabi ng China, now pay you mind, both China and the Philippines are signatories to UNCLOS. And as signatories to UNCLOS, they agreed on all of these rules, yung i-describe ko sa inyo. Okay? They agreed to that, no? Pero si China, in a power struggle with the US, kasi yumaman na yung China, no? All of a sudden, in recent years, they started arguing na they own all of the South China Sea up to this 9-dash line. Bilangin nyo yan. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. kung tingnan nyo ang mapa na yan, aba, ay malapit na sa Pilipinas, and it overlaps and takes over the Philippines exclusive economic zone, so West Philippine Sea. Actually, I refuse to call the South China Sea South China Sea. I call it now the West Philippine Sea. Kasi what's in a name, di ba? When you name something, you own it. And China, they wanted South China Sea. So ang Pilipinas, West Philippine Sea. So sabi ng China, ganoon. And then they started building artificial islands on the Scarborough Shoal, Spratly Islands. Ito ang ginawa nila. Ayan, itong Scarborough Shoal, meron tayong tawag dyan sa Filipino. Ang tawag dyan, Panatag Shoal. Okay? Ang Whitsun Reef, ayan, Chinese battleship, no? Nasa Whitsun Reef, ang tawag natin dyan, Julian Felipe. And then, Chinese military ships surrounded also Panatag Shoal. Here, and you can see here examples of all the artificial islands they built on the Spratly Islands, which we call a different name, no? They call, ang tawag natin sa Scarborough Shoal and Scarborough Shoal is Panatag. Spratly Islands, we call them the Kalayaan Island Group. Okay? Kasi for generations since time immemorial, yan ang mga sacred fishing grounds ng mga Agusan tribes. Even before several hundreds of years ahead of the Ming Dynasty explorations of the Philippines. So if China wants to talk about historical rights, then maybe we have to remind them of the historical fishing grounds of our various tribes. Pero let's not talk about that kasi natalo na sila sa argument na yon sa Hague ruling, ano. So, let's go back to China's claim. Sabi nila, we own all of this. And then they started building islands to extend their territorial water rights. Kasi if you have an island, you own an island, then all of a sudden you have 12 nautical miles territorial sea, you have 200 nautical miles of EEZ, 350 nautical miles of continental shelf, etc., etc., no? Pero the Hague Court reminded China, hey, wait a minute, have you forgotten the rules? Ito, if you don't know this, itong nakakatawa. Sa Spratlys, most of the islands there are not islands. Halos karamihan sa kanila ay mga bato lang, no? And in fact, a lot of them are not even above high tide elevation, low tide elevation, no? So under the rules of the UNCLOS, ito ang mga rules, no? Does the land formation remain above water during high tide? Sabi ng UNCLOS, no. Then it's a low tide elevation, and therefore, you know, it possesses maritime entitlements subject only to the following rules. If the answer to does the land formation remain above water during high tide is yes, then there's a second question involved. The question is, can it sustain human habitation or economic life? If the answer is no, then it's just a rock and it's only entitled to 12 nautical miles territorial sea. But if it can sustain human habitation, then it's an island and therefore it is entitled to 200 nautical miles EEZ. So sabi ng China, uy, mas marami tayong makukuhang teritoryo, 200 nautical miles EEZ, if we just build an island over these rocks. Okay? So, makita niyo yung slide ko ng mga artificial islands nila. Ayun, nag-build sila ng islands kasi mayaman na sila. Kasi kami dito sa Amerika, bumili ng mga consumption goods sa kanila at inilipat namin yung mga businesses namin sa kanila. So pinayaman namin ang mga Chinese. So sorry po sa inyo sa Pilipinas because we empowered them by making them rich and they started building these artificial islands, right? Okay. So, sabi ng Hague Court, no, China, your artificial islands do not qualify to 200 nautical miles of EEC because they're artificial. The rules in the UNCLOS only apply to natural islands. Okay? So yun ang ruling ng Hague Court. In addition, the Hague Court said that China's claims on the 9-dash line are incompatible with UNCLOS and are superseded by UNCLOS because China, as early as the 1990s, signed the UNCLOS and agreed to its provisions. So how come now it's changing its tune? Okay. The Hague ruling also said yung Scarborough Shoal, which we call Panatag Shoal or Bajo de Masinloc, the Spratly Islands, Mischief Reef, and the second Thomas Shoal belong to the Philippines EEZ. So no, China, you cannot claim them for yourself. Besides China, sabi ng court, we remind you of the definition of an archipelago, that the lands must be integral to your mainland. Eh yung mga islands na kiniklaim ng China ay all the way here, mas malapit pa sa Pilipinas. So Philippines has more right than you to these islands, sabi ng court, no? Okay. Also, the court adjudged China as having violated Philippine sovereign rights by interfering with fishing and petroleum exploration and constructing artificial islands and by failing to prevent Chinese fishermen from fishing in the zone. And China caused severe harm to marine and coral reef environment because of its land reclamations. Later on, we're going to speak a bit on the geopolitical implications of China's artificial islands. Okay. When you take a look at this, itong graph, itong map dito, it shows all the different countries laying claims on the various rocks and islands in the Spratlys. So makikita nyo dito na ang kiniklaim ng Philippines is mostly the northeastern portion of the Spratlys. Yung ibang countries are Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, and of course, China and Taiwan. No? You will see here the paracels, which are claimed by China, the Spratlys, which are claimed by all these different countries, and the Scarborough Shoal, kind of form like a triangle, So this is the reason why China is arguing they own this whole portion of the West Philippine Sea, is because if they can control all of this, they control all of the trade, which consists of $13 trillion of trade every year. It's also very strategic in controlling whatever happens politically to all these nations. No? And this is where I discovered, makita nyo dito yung infrared night boat detection. In 2012, tingnan nyo, yung mga foreign boats, mostly from China, hindi masyadong marami. Tingnan nyo yung 2019. That's mostly Chinese boats and vessels and ships, both military and commercial. Kasi ang ginagamit ng China, ginagamit din nila ang kanilang mga fishermen as paramilitary boats to lay claim on various portions of this ocean. So makita nyo yung golden triangle ng China. what China is attempting to claim, no? It is in investigating this that I discovered why the Marcoses, including Duterte, are kowtowing to the Chinese. You know why? And why the Chinese are supporting Marcos's candidacy in various ways. You know how they argue, the Marcoses, that because of them, Ilocos Norte progressed? And do you know how they achieved this? They achieved this by one-to-one relationships and diplomatic relationships with China straight away without even going through the national government. So they allowed Chinese businesses to form businesses in Ilocos Norte. As of to date, there are no less than 127 Chinese corporations operating and registered in Ilocos Norte. 127. And Chinese businesses and organizations, including the Chinese government, have been actively donating to Ilocanos through the elite groups of the cronies of the Marcoses in Ilocos Norte. China has even set up a consulate in Lawag, which has been serving as a hub between Chinese businessmen and Ilocano oligarchs or Northern Philippine elites. So in a way, tama din yung data that says the Marcoses improved the economic conditions in Ilocos Norte, but they did this primarily through the Chinese. And by solidifying their base in Ilocos Norte, that made it easier for the Marcoses to reclaim power slowly, little by little, over these 30 years, to the point that almost all of their family seems to be running for public office now, di ba? Kung may pera ka at pwede mong bayaran ang mga tao and you can buy them loyalty, madaling gawin yan, di ba? Alam niyo yan, di ba? And who funded the Duterte presidency and campaign? Duterte himself, loose-lipped, in one of his speeches, tumatawa pa siya, kind of thanked the Marcoses for funding his campaign. Si Amy, of course, legal lawyer trained siya, hindi siya lawyer, pero lawyer trained siya. She knows a little about the law. Nagka-nervyos si Amy nung sinabi ni Duterte in front of the whole world that it was the Marcoses who funded his campaign. Tapos nung in-interview si Amy, pagkatapos ng speech na yon, tumatawa lang si Amy, sabi niya, ay nako, Diyos ko, alam naman yung si Presidente Duterte. He's just joking. So pinalabas niya na, she dismissed it as just a joke, na mahilig lang mag-joke si Duterte. Pero in fact, it's true. So when you consider how both Duterte and Marcos are soft on the Chinese, this is the reason why. It's because the Chinese are instrumental in helping installing them in power in our own country. And the Marcoses acted as their own sovereign state practically by negotiating directly with China for benefits for Ilocos Norte, bypassing the national government. Imagine the brazenness of that. Okay? So, you know, on the one hand, hindi mo rin mabiblame yung mga Ilocano if they support the Marcoses because of the Marcoses, their lives were improved. Kaya lang, ang tanong ko sa mga kapwa nating Pilipino na mga Ilocano, at what cost? Kayo nga umasenso under the Marcos, you help them get back to power, pero at the cost of what? All of us. Nagsasaya kayo ngayon, pero ano ang kahihinatnan niyan? Pag pinabayaan natin, maging nasa Malacanang uli ang mga Marcos, no? Okay. Second to last slide na to, no? Para magpahinga naman ako at kayo naman ang magsalita. What to expect in a BBM presidency? You can be sure, based on our review of Marcos regime history, that he will continue his father's authoritarian legacy. He looks like a nice guy now. I don't blame you when you say he looks like a nice guy, soft-spoken and all that. But remember, he's a very good puppet. So it doesn't matter if he's soft, if he's a nice guy. What matters is the power behind the throne. Sino yung power behind the throne? I'll let you answer that, okay? The important thing is he's a good, useful tool. Sabi nga ng mga Russians tungkol kay Donald Trump, he is our useful tool. So, is Bongbong Marcos a useful tool? And for whom? Kayo nang sumagot nun. He will certainly revise both Philippine history and territorial rights. He will finish rewriting Philippine history to completely erase the bad Marcos record. He will set aside the 2016 Hague ruling. Before I go further, I forgot to mention, when Bongbong and Duterte say, try to argue with you, say, pabayaan na natin yung Hague ruling na yan. Mag-compromise lang tayo sa China. Kasi tingnan naman mo naman tayo, laki-laki ng China. Paano tayo mag-win ng war with China? We cannot win a war in China. So this is one of the false argumentations, ano? Again, no? Yung fallacy, no? Totoo nga na we cannot win an outright war directly with China. But it fails to mention na ito rin yung tawag natin na red herring, ano? Kasi it fails to mention na there are other options of the Philippines to enforce the Hague ruling in its favor. And this is where international law is very important to understand. Kasi yung mga hindi nakakaintindi ng international law, pag narinig nila yung argument ni Duterte, ni Marcos, na hindi nga naman tayo, paano tayong mananalo kung may giyera na tayo sa China? Ang liit-liit naman ng Pilipinas. Ay sige na nga makipag-compromise na tayo sa mga Chinese. Diba? Madaling mag-agree. Pero hindi nila naiintindihan na in fact we have other options other than going to war with China. What can we do? Well, first of all, we already have the decision of an international court in our favor. That's a big deal. It's a big deal that Duterte and Bongbong Marcos are making into a small deal and dismissing as meaningless. What kind of national leader gives up something like that, which is a big thing in favor of your country? You readily give up just like that without a fight? You know, kung stricto ka, you will even argue na that's a sign of treason. Why will you easily give away territorial rights of your country just like that without a fight? Makita mo, kasi even Duterte benefited from the Chinese. He's been negotiating for infrastructure projects. And also, well, I give you that, COVID-19 vaccines, Filipinos need that. Pero at what cost, Filipinos? At the cost of giving up your sovereign territorial rights. You know, I'm all for you getting vaccinated, but there are other countries offering you this. The US offered you this without asking you to give up. Okay, I'm not saying this kasi nasa Amerika ako, pero I'm just using rationality, you know. You will accept from China, who's asking to take some of your territorial waters? Or will you accept aid from other countries who are not asking that at all from you? They just want to help you, because the only way to defeat the COVID-19 pandemic is that for all of us to get vaccinated. That's the real truth of it. Okay, so the other modes, the other things, options open to the Philippines is to join up with other countries. And right now, the majority of countries all over the world, including most of the countries that signed UNCLOS, are behind and backing the Philippines on this. They're siding with the Philippines on this against China. That's a big deal, because when the majority of nation states agree on something, that's a source of international law. And in this respect, China is a rogue nation. China, from this perspective, is the outlaw nation. Many countries are offering their help to the Philippines. ASEAN na lang, no? Yung ASEAN group can ally themselves and engage. There have already been proposals to group together and group their resources in order to pose a reasonable alternative to Chinese military might in the South China Sea or Western Philippine Sea. Bakit natin hindi i-accept yung ino-offer ng mga ibang nations to help us against China? Why? Those are other options. Why will you readily give up to China when you are not only in the right and most of the nations of the world agree with you? That's because you don't have political will to capitalize on what's in your favor, because you are beholden to the Chinese. What will Marcos do? As puppet president, he will enable his family to escape liabilities, allow expiration of statute of limitations on non-payment of Marcos estate taxes, pardon his mother for her conviction for graft and corruption, terminate the PCGG, and ensconce the Marcos political dynasty by establishing a structure to keep generations of Marcoses in power and develop new cronies, among whom are Duterte, whom they will protect from the International Criminal Court for violations of human rights law. And Bongbong Marcos will follow the Marcos dictator's playbook in response to sure protests and uprisings when their bad behavior manifests again. And you can count on that. In closing, I want to end with this. Back to Santayana. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. You know, in all likelihood, this lecture is probably useless in convincing people for whom facts and reason no longer matter. What's the solution then? I'm afraid only a long-term solution has a realistic chance to work. Nothing less than the re-education of the Filipino to make up for his miseducation since the Marcoses' return to power will do. And this would take years, if not decades, just as it took the Marcoses at least 2 decades to whitewash, if not completely erase, the true history of the Marcos regime from our national consciousness. Is Philippine democracy then doomed in the upcoming elections? Are Filipinos doomed to have another Marcos at the helm of Philippine power, which would definitely set us all back to the dark days of Marcos dynastic rule that would hence be impossible to uproot from Philippine politics and society, a look at the attendance of hundreds of thousands of our people at Leni Robredo's rallies campaign appeared to belie the polls that say Bongbong Marcos is still ahead. It bears to stress that the essence of activism is optimism. For without optimism, positive change is not possible. Thus, I refuse to sink into defeatism like Duterte and Bongbong Marcos saying we cannot do anything about the Chinese encroachment on our territory. I refuse to descend into despair like so many of our people who think we are hopeless and therefore we should just give in to the Marcoses. No. The sky is darkest just before dawn. And it was our farmers who told us this. I don't know if our efforts to fight the Marcoses' historical denialism and revisionism will work enough and in time to save our democracy in the upcoming elections. But what I do know is this: if we stop trying, we will surely fail. Let me share with you some crucial relevant lessons that I learned as a student leader in UP and as a political science scholar in UP. Number one, our political problems are directly related with our economic problems. Number two, our economic problems are in turn determined by our economic system and influenced by the socio-economic political structure that economic system generates. Number three, because the interests of the economic elite are historically aligned with those of the political elite, the two groups inevitably collude with each other to keep themselves in power and privilege and to amass more wealth for themselves. Number four, the source of the elite oligarchy's wealth, power, and privilege is often traceable to their relationship with our former colonizers and feudal roots. Some suggest that the Marcoses' return to power manifests the resentment of many Filipinos against the oligarchic stranglehold over the country's economy in the last 36 years since the EDSA revolt that ousted Marcos Sr., an order which left many poor and disenfranchised. This statement raises two questions. First, who are these oligarchs against whom the Marcoses are presenting themselves as alternatives? Second, how come our democratic elections, no matter who is elected, have not resulted in changes in our society substantial enough to significantly improve the living conditions of the Filipino masses? Let's tackle the first. Haven't the Marcoses themselves become part of the oligarchy? Didn't they become richer than even the richest of the traditional wealthy class in Philippine society through their looting of the nation's coffers? The so-called feud between the Marcoses and by extension Duterte with Philippine oligarchs is a sham. It only speaks to the fact that the Philippine oligarchy is not a homogeneous group. On the one hand, there are the old elites or the old rich, and on the other hand, you have the new elites or the nouveau riche. Nouveau riche, French kasi yan, no? The latter are the newly wealthy Filipinos who lack or have no connections with the traditional or feudal elites who could trace their roots to our former colonial rulers and thus were condescended upon by the traditional elites. Yet, these new elites nevertheless aspired to the same wealth, power, and privilege of the traditional elites. Thus, in the sense of economic and political objectives, they did not differ from the old elites. And the best example in our history of such new elites are none other than the Marcoses. The Marcoses had long aspired to become part of the Philippine oligarchy or traditional elites of Philippine society, yet many of the old elites saw them as mere opportunists. Gold diggers ang mga yan, sabi nila. Inisnab sila. Well, little did they know how good of a gold digger the Marcoses are, considering they stole the gold mined from the Philippines and shipped them in crates. In the early 1980s, nagsiship na sila ng crate loads of gold bullions abroad and sold the proceeds and stashed the proceeds in their Swiss bank accounts. Yung mga intelligentsia naman, kaya nga ang Marcos, usually the intelligentsia were the owners of newspapers, presses, telecommunications networks, TV stations, radio stations, no? Galit din yung mga Marcos sa mga yan. They call them mga elitista yan, no? Yung mga educated na yan, mga elitista lang yan. Di ba? Ginawa din yan under Duterte. Yung mga trolls ni Duterte, they tried to dismiss people who study, people who are educated. They tried to dismiss their value in order to dismiss their well-studied conclusions about Duterte and the Marcoses. That's how they try to manipulate your thinking, by dismissing educated people as no good people. How can you generalize an entire population like that? You will discredit educated people because it just happens that educated people have the skills and knowledge to properly critique the Marcoses and Duterte. At saka, false politics yon to para entice the poor people. See, we're on your side. We're against these elites. So wag niyong pakinggan yung mga edukadong yan. What have they done anyway for you? Well, it's true. Some educated people did not use their education to help our people. That's also true. So the intelligentsia, anong ginawa ng mga Marcos? Marcos sequestered, closed down their newspapers, their telecommunications networks. No? Yun yung revenge ng mga Marcoses. When their patriarch, Ferdinand, rose and ascended to the presidency and declared martial law, that's when they got their revenge on the old oligarchic families. Now remember, if you're a very rich family, your number one concern is how do you minimize the damage to your wealth and your standing in the community. That is why it is no wonder that the economic elites usually cooperate and end up colluding with the political elites in order to maintain their wealth, their power, and their privileges. In time, even some of the old oligarchic families, like the Zubel de Ayalas, the Aranetas, the Sorianos, learned to dance the tango with the Marcoses because they were being pragmatic. That was the way you survive a dictatorship. Tingnan mo, yung ginawa nila ng mga Marcos sa mga Lopezes, that was a warning against all the oligarchs. So that's how the Marcoses and their cronies became the new oligarchs of Philippine society. And by their power, even succeeded in tempting the old oligarchs to play with them. Included na yan si Cojuangco, no? And so this is the context I propose to you in which to understand the real truth of this sham false feud of Duterte and the Marcoses against the old oligarchs. They're only against oligarchs who are against them, who oppose their dominance. Pero the truth is they aspire to be oligarchs too. Diba? In fact, today, the most dominant oligarchic family in the Philippines are the Marcoses, because they not only own practically everything, like Imelda said, through their cronies. They have all these billions of dollars of ill-gotten wealth. Almost all of their kids and grandkids are now running for public office and are in public office. This brings us to the second question. Why is it that our so-called democratic elections never seem to be able to produce changes in our society substantial enough to truly improve the quality of life of Filipino masses? We have seen this dynamic play out repeatedly in our national history. In the end, it is clear that whenever there were conflicts among the various groups that belong to the elite class or oligarchs, whether old or new, such as the Marcoses, the Aquinos, the Macabagals, those were, in essence, merely struggles for power and domination rather than pointing to true difference of philosophy in how to reform Philippine society. Why? Because the way society was organized politically, economically, and socially was already more than beneficial to them. That's why would they change something that wasn't already working to their advantage at the expense of the rest of us? As they say, when something's not broken, why fix it? To them, the system is working perfectly well indeed to their advantage. It's only from the perspective of Filipino masses that the system is truly broken. The author Miles Garcia suggests that the oligarch issue is thus merely an oligarch versus cronygarch issue, and he's right. One could say that greed and corruption are part of human nature, that we cannot change this. I disagree. This is your classic false dichotomy argument. Human beings still have the power to choose. They could choose whether to give in to those baser instincts, or they could, as Abraham Lincoln said, allow themselves to be guided by the better angels of our nature. If you add flawed human beings to a fundamentally flawed socio-economic political system, what do you get? An endless vicious loop of swinging the pendulum every election cycle between feuding political and economic elites who never really get to solve our nation's problems because they're not really that different from each other. This is how and why the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer in the Philippines. What is the path forward then? I conclude it is no longer enough for us to point the finger at the Marcoses and the historical denialism they initiated and promoted to defeat our democracy. We have to look deeper. Specifically, we have to look deeper into ourselves as a people. Who are we? What do we truly want? not only our personal individual aspirations or aspirations for our families, but more importantly, at this point of our history, our aspirations likewise as a people. It's said that we Filipinos don't really have a national identity, that whatever national unity we hope for will always be compromised by tribal rivalries that were artificially suppressed by our colonial rulers, which nevertheless remained brewing beneath our artificial unity that was forged out of the necessity to expel our foreign invaders. One might see from this that it was ironically our colonizers who were instrumental in enabling us to see ourselves as one people. They united us against them. But now that we are a politically independent nation state, our tribal rivalries have returned to haunt us with a vengeance. This may explain why some of us now question why Tagalog is our national language when it is really only the language of the Taga-Ilogs, as opposed to the Kapampangans, the Visayans, the Ilocanos, etc. Would this also explain why much of the northern Philippines, which identifies itself with the Ilocos-based Marcoses, puts the Marcos family over country? Again, the question begs to be answered. Who is the Filipino? What does the Filipino nation aspire to become? Are we really only a nation of cheaters, looters, and mercenary puppets? Electing another Marcos to the presidency would suggest we are. That will be the day I will be ashamed to be a Filipino. But do we have a national identity strong enough, large enough, and principled enough to unite us against whatever threatens our integrity as a nation, both from inside and outside threats? My answer to you, mga kababayan ko, is this. We only have to look at the hundreds and the thousands of graves of our real heroes who truly fought and died for our freedoms to know the answer. Hindi yung fake na hero na nakalibing sa libingan ng mga bayani. Bongbong Marcos is brazenly running on a presidential campaign, proposing himself as the only leader who could unite Filipinos into a new so-called golden age of progress and prosperity built upon his father's legacy. But what is that legacy? I hope my lecture has more than adequately answered that. And what does Bongbong Marcos mean when he says he is going to be a uniter? Beyond the nice yet abstract and very shallow ring to that term as applied to him. Hindi man siya makipagdebate. He's a coward who cannot afford to be shamed yet again in a presidential debate. Kaya hindi siya nagipagdebate. Di ba? Have you heard his speeches? How he rambles on incoherently. Is this going to be the next president of the Philippines? He cannot even express himself in one complete coherent sentence. If anything, Bongbong Marcos, because of his family, because of what they did to our people, because of their remorselessness and continued impunity against our laws and morality as a nation, I would argue is the most divisive of the presidential candidates. Is the son of the conjugal dictatorship that stole everything from us, our people's dignity, our nation's wealth and democracy, our lives, particularly the lives of Filipino sons and daughters lost to torture and killings to keep the Marcoses in power. This scion of that family who lied to us so many times and are still lying to us about everything. And it doesn't seem to matter what they lie about, whether big or small, they just lie. Could we really trust this guy to be our uniter and leader? Could we really trust the Marcoses to hold the reins of power over us again? The answer, the only sane answer, is a resounding no. The Marcoses are not the underdogs they purport to be, but rather the very same dogs who doggedly push their self-interest at the cost of our democracy and our lives. And the Marcoses have not and are not running for public office simply for public service, as Bongbong and the rest of them seeking public office like to say. For the truth is, and the ugly secret the Marcoses don't want our people to know and understand is that they really don't care about us, any of us, much less the most marginalized of our people. Tawag nga ni Imelda sa mga mahihirap, my little people. Para siyang the queen, no? Calling yung mga mahihirap, the most marginalized of Filipinos, her little people. And I tell you, we will remain their little people if you elect another Marcos to the presidency. All these decades since the Marcoses ouster, who's been paying for all the foreign debt the Marcoses incurred in our name and then funneled off to their offshore bank accounts? Ang masang Filipino, who's been suffering the deleterious effects of environmental change caused by the Marcoses and their cronies through their plunder of our country's natural resources. Ang masang Filipino. And who do you think will be bearing the biggest burden of the climate crisis increasingly brought about by such environmental devastation? Ang masang Filipino. Therefore, I ask, if it's the Filipino masses who are suffering, not the Marcoses, from the Marcoses' wrongdoings, is it wise then to trust the Marcoses again, especially when they say they only want what's best for our people? Do you trust that? Is it rational to elect another Marcos as the Philippines' next president? Is that a sane choice? Remember the saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And the definition of stupidity, doing the same thing repeatedly yet expecting a different result. So you will vote another Marcos again, expecting it's going to be totally different from his father's regime? The stakes have never been higher for Filipinos in the upcoming elections. For the Marcoses, their power, wealth, and urgent need to escape their personal liabilities for their wrongs against our nation. For the Filipino masses, their very lives, human rights, and democracy itself. We must persevere. We must fight to the last ounce of our material, physical, intellectual, and emotional strength to help our fellow Filipinos see who among the candidates, based on history, their personal record, and the facts, number one, truly has the interests of the Filipino masses at heart. Number two, who has a real and viable platform to realize those interests. And number three, based on true history and their personal record, does not aspire merely to a government leadership position to acquire more personal wealth and power. Panahon na para isailalim ang lahat ng ating mga kandidato sa tunay na pagsubok ng tunay na paglilingkod sa masang Pilipino. Una, konkretong record ng tapat ng pamumuno at paglilingkod sa masang Pilipino. At pangalawa, tunay na plataporma na nakatuon sa pagre-reforma ng sistemang pampolitika at ekonomiya ng Pilipinas upang maghatid ng tunay na pagbabago sa pagpapaunlad at pag-aangat ng buhay ng masang Pilipino. Oras na, mga kababayan ko, para tapusin na ang kabaliwan ng mga Marcos at ang kanilang paglalamang sa ating bayan. Itigil na natin ang mga aksyon na sa katunayan ay laban lamang sa ating sariling kapakanakan at kapakanakan ng ating bayan. Huwag na nating iboto ang mga oligarkong pamilya na pampolitika at pang-ekonomiya na parati lamang nagsusupil ang nang-aapi sa atin pag sila'y nakaupo na sa kapangyarihan. Tulad ng sinabi ng ating bayani at kapwa kong manunulat na Kapampangan na si Aurelio Tolentino, huwag tayong maging dilat bulag. Gumising na tayo, bayan ko. Maraming salamat po. Now I'm ready for your questions.
So, our lecture has, of course, gone above and beyond, not only in terms of its content and the explanation that Attorney Victoria has given us, but also in its time. So, of course, for consideration na din for, ma'am, I believe it's about 4 something in the morning na rin po dyan.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, opo. So
no, it's not. It's 1:25 a.m. But I am in my prime because I usually work at night. So it all depends on you. If you're worried about me, don't worry about me.
Okay, so of course, as mentioned kanina sa patakaran, you may send your questions via the chat box, or you can use the raise hand option so that you may be called or your question be recognized in the floor. So that being said, do we have any more questions regarding the information or the lecture that we have just seen, or any other topics related to that? Pwede po kayo mag-chat sa chat box, so please do chat. Okay. Okay, once more, do we have any more questions regarding our previous lecture or anything regarding with regards to it? I mean, I would understand naman if wala. Sobrang extensive po nung lecture. It seems that naunahan niyo na kami lahat sa questions namin. Okay, so it seems...
Pwede bang reaction na lang? Reaction?
Yes, reactions are welcome. Kasi gusto ko naman makarinig ng ibang boses kaysa sa boses ko.
Opo.
It's just too bad na kasi hindi sayang nga kasi natamaan sa academic I found the discussion of attorney very, very, very comprehensive, highly informative and well researched. Kaya sabi ko, nag-uusap kami ng asawa ko kasi pumasok din siya kanina, pinanood niya. We will actually share this with our clergy, the Catholic clergy, no? Although, kasi ang ganda no? And ako, talagang isasama ko siya sa dapat bigyan niya ako ng kopya ng recorded na yan kasi I'm gonna upload it in my G-class and really require my students to watch it. Kahit yan na lang. Kasi natuhog niya lahat from historical, no? Very comprehensive, At
Thank
nandyan,
you.
hindi lang siya nakafocus dun sa revisionism, even the West Philippine Sea, actually kasama yan sa ano ko eh, sa mga pinabasa ko sa mga bata. And I was so impressed. I almost got, actually, bilib ako sa energy mo, attorney, no? For 7 hours non-stop, no? Ang galing. Siyempre,
I can't believe it myself that I'm seeing the clock now.
I mean, nanggagaling sa puso yan eh. The passion that you have. And of course, you were at the front line, no? Front line ng EDSA. Hindi maintindihan niya ng iba eh. Kasi ako din, I was also an eyewitness. Pero nasa gilid lang ako. Hindi ako sumasama sa mga ganun. Pero we observe and we also do some analysis, no? Kaya lang, syempre, on the other side, ibang perspective naman yan, eh marami pang mga nangyari in between the EDSA, no? Kasi yung EDSA naman, it's actually a concerted effort of different sectors, no? Pero ako, bilib ako talaga. Napakagandang discussion. Medyo, sayang nga lang hindi nagpursige yung iba. Pero ako, bilib ako dun sa mga nanatili sa, sa Zoom, no? But I hope the organizers will post this webinar via FB. Although bawal sa atin ang mag-post via live, pero sana naman i-post natin for public viewing.
And actually,
napakaswerte po namin. I mean, yung pitong oras, wala kaming pambayad dyan. Sabi ko nga kay Eliza, maswerte tayo at we got her for free at talagang libreng-libre, talagang tad-tad ng mga data, yung mga sinabi niya. Sabi ko, at nandun pa yung passion mo, hindi mo maalis yan. Yun ang hindi namin makakalimutan. We were so thankful and appreciative of what you have shared, prepared, and shared for. I mean, that's part of educating. And syempre, may konting pitik yan sa mga history teachers, no? Medyo natawa ako dun eh.
They have to carry the responsibility for that, diba? But first of all, Olive, thank you so much for your wonderful comments, no? But this is what I wanna, there are many universities and colleges now considering including a martial law course in their programs. And while I was developing this, I realized what I was doing. I was creating an entire course semester program.
It's a module, actually.
So let me offer this to you and CLSU, no? You let it be known, and whoever out there is interested, I'm donating my services as a teacher for a course on the Marcos regime, because I have all the materials already. And in fact, sabi nga ni Ruben Carranza na meron akong na-include sa listahan ko na hindi pa niya alam na nangyari, no? Because really, I devoted heart, body, and soul to this for 6 weeks because I wanted so much to help our people to make a wise decision in the upcoming elections. Pero in the process, as academics, no, kasi nagturo din ako ng college, this is in essence a whole semester's course that I delivered in 7 hours?
7 hours.
Until you told me that, I didn't even realize I talked for 7 hours straight.
Ang galing nga, sabi ko.
Unbelievable. At napakabait naman nitong si Aaron na he let me talk for 7 hours.
Well, ma'am, we told you last time, since we were constrained by time natin, na next time it would be the definitive edition. So
bumawi na kayo ng gusto.
Bumawi sila.
Bumawi. But I will be perfectly happy to teach a course to your students completely free. I'm donating my services
I like that.
to your university. If you want me to teach a course of history, the Marcos regime, all of these stuff. Kasi, alam mo, Aaron, one time I reached out kasi parang I was affected emotionally. Nag-share ako kay Olive. I told her, alam mo, Olive, as I'm preparing this lecture now for Masa, I just realized I was also involved with the I'm also involved with the Hague ruling because of my history that I was this, no? That I was this person who helped, a researcher lang naman ako. Kasi ako yung slave labor, no? Pero yung slave labor na talagang yung gumawa ng tedious work, no? Tapos sabi ni Ollie, ang ganda naman ng history mo, ng experience mo. Oo nga, sa sarili ko, katakataka naman na itong mga issue that you asked me to lecture on point sa experience ko din, personal, related sa actual personal experience ko. You know? Tapos nalungkot ako kasi sabi ko, sa lahat ng talino ko, sa lahat ng mga academic degrees ko, ay hindi ako nakapagsilbi ng husto sa ating bayan, no? Pero sabi ko, this is my chance, no? Through this lecture, to give everything I have, you know, intellect, body, mind, and soul, nandyan na, no? Kaya hindi ko man, I'm not even aware I spoke. This is a first. This is history itself for me. I've never talked for 7 straight hours. And with
No
all the
dinner yet.
passion too.
Wala ka pang dinner niyan, ha?
Actually, I'm fine. I'm so full of energy right now, believe it or not.
Okay, so, ayun po. If you don't mind, ma'am, you know, should we like move on na sa awarding ng certificate and all that? So,
By all means.
okay, so, i-share ko lang po. Okay, so, give me a few seconds lang po, yung laptop ko medyo ano eh. So, share screen. Okay, so, yan, Central Luzon State University, the Office of Student Organizations Unit, Maayong samahan ng Agang Panlipunan. This certificate of appreciation is awarded to Attorney Victoria J. Smith for sharing her knowledge and expertise on the online webinar entitled Rebuttal to Revisionist Philippine History, a primer on the Marcos regime and the legacy that still haunts the Filipino people. During the Kumustahan, pagtalakay sa kalagayan ng iba't ibang sektor ng Pilipinas, held on the 25th of April 2022. This certificate is signed by our Executive Secretary and Activity Head, Ms. Eliza Maligamis, our advisor in MASA, Ma'am Faye Camille C. Abaw, Chairman of this organization, Avon Jun Fajardo, and our other advisor, Sir Hercules J. Huy. So, before we move on to the closing remarks, if it would still be possible para sa mga, sa mga, how do I say this, our fellow students na who have joined us in the entirety of this lecture, through second 10 nga nung lecture, if it would still be possible, please turn on yung inyong camera para sa ating photo op.
They all deserve a medal for listening to me for 7 hours.
Yeah.
Thank you po,
Actually,
attorney.
ma'am,
Saludo ako sa inyong lahat.
I actually joked nga po sa group chat namin kanina, like, guys, I feel like this is going to be 1 semester's worth na ng history. In history, economics, and international law. Well, mukhang ganun.
Kompleto, Ricardo.
Multidisciplinary, ano?
Full package nga po eh.
Pasensya na kayo.
6 credits na po
Haba-haba ng
yan.
lecture ko, no?
Actually,
6
okay na din
credits.
po.
You know what you can do? You can edit the video and then divide them into 1-hour sessions.
Different part po.
Yes po. Okay po. We would look into that. We would also post the link to the PowerPoint along with the video para meron silang physical copy. So, if they don't feel like watching the video, they can actually look it up like the last PowerPoint that you had produced po.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
so
just discovered may konting mga typo errors dun sa mga presenters notes ko. So unless you want to wait for me to send that the corrected version, it's still okay. Pagpasensya na lang ninyo yung typos.
okay, so seems like first panel pa lang, we still have 2 panels of people who have not opened their cameras. If okay lang guys, paki-open yung camera nyo.
Yeah. I can see some of my friends and family here also. Pakita naman ninyo yung mga mukha ninyo. I want to see you. Oh, my sister just put that heart. My sister is very active in the chat. I could see that now. Kasi hindi ko nakikita yung chat while I was presenting the slides, Oh, my cousin Artercilia, my sister Arlene Grageda Molina, my brother-in-law Ira Subardiaga is there too. Pakita naman ninyo yung mga itsura ninyo, yung beautiful faces nyo.
Ayaw ko, makukumpara yung itsura namin sa'yo.
Ay, Diyos ko!
Hi, Olive.
Magaganda tayong lahat.
Oo.
Okay, so
Bilib ako sa kanila, nandito pa sila.
Thank you so much. Sir Aaron, tsaka Ma'am Oliva, 6 units na daw yan eh.
Dapat nga.
Yung
tingnan mo,
kailangan i-record ng sino yung talagang nandoon from beginning to end.
Oo,
At
tingnan mo,
yun,
nag-smile
una
sila.
sila, no? Kailangan grade nila 1.
Nag-smile sila kasi they stayed.
Yes.
okay,
Oo.
so
Thank you so much.
we have somewhat of a majority naman na sa naka-on ng camera. So if you could po please look into the camera, i-screenshot ko lang po. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, give me a few seconds lang para ilagay ito.
Si Olive is joining us. Olive.
On and off. Yan. Nagluloko yung aking note.
Yan.
Opo, na-capture naman po kayo ma'am bago kayo na ano.
Okay.
Fortunately, we have like half nung attendees natin gano'n, hindi umalis na sila kanina, but they have been recorded naman po sa recording, so yung attendance nila is nandoon, and hopefully they also learned a few things. Well, actually a lot of
Ilang
things.
view madami.
Opo, yun nga po eh.
Bonus na.
Multi-academic na yan, multi-course.
Yan, so okay na po yung ating photo op, and of course moving on to the closing remarks, that would actually be on me din. Ayun nga po, nabanggit naman na ni ma'am kanina, na among other things, na it is our social obligation not only to ourselves as decent human beings, but also sa kapwa natin and sa bansa natin to not just follow the sway of the political wind like a mindless horde. We have to think, we have to be critical, and despite other things going on, others opt to be silent, others opt to be careful, others opt to be stringent or stingy when it comes to such topics. We at I might be as bold to say that we at MASA believe that in such sensitive times, the truth is the most important of all. If the times are sensitive, then revealing the truth is the best you can do, and not sugarcoating until it passes by and the coast is now clear when it comes to saying such things on such a sensitive time. And moving on, I guess, I can't say anymore naman na at it was already taught and said kanina, to my fellow students na nandito, voting is not just a process that you have to endure on a very hot day. You have to endure the people, the risk of COVID, the heat, the everything included in that. But it is a sacred right afforded to people that we almost take for granted on an everyday basis. Not all of us have been blessed with having rights, even though our system is not perfect. It still has a lot of its problems. We can also feel that on every level of the government and of our daily lives. But still, alas, we have our rights, and that's something to be thankful of. And one way to be thankful of that and to ensure that it no longer regresses into even more dysfunctional depths is to practice your right as a voter and an intelligent voter at that. Educate yourself. We don't mean to imply information to you. You can do it yourself. The only thing that we ask of you is that, of course, you have the rationality to do it yourself based on rational, logical analysis and not hearsay or just, emotional opinion or something like that. So, with that being said, I guess that's going to end my closing remarks. I hope that everyone here had enjoyed and learned a lot of things, a lot of new things to think about on their everyday life when they go outside and participate in society. So with that, I end my remarks, and I wish everyone a very fruitful afternoon and a very fruitful morning on Miss Victoria's side. So yun po.